Jackie Edgerton is a conservative, an attorney, a wife, a mother, and a political outsider who now wants to become the next state representative for House District 112, which covers Sullivan's Island, the Isle of the Palms, parts of the Mount Pleasant, and Awendaw. Today, I talk one-on-one with Jackie about why she's running for the seat for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Jackie Edgerton, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. It's great to see you this morning.
I appreciate it greatly. I know that you are an attorney whose career has been committed to public service and seeking justice, according to your website. You're also a mother of 2 daughters in local schools, a defender of life, and a pro-Second Amendment conservative who's never run for office, according to your website as well. You said that you are a true public political outsider. Speaking of politics, you're now a Republican candidate for House District 112, which covers parts of Mount Pleasant, and of course, Isle of the Palms and Sullivan's Island. Let me ask you this. How do you view politics from the outside right now?
How do I view politics from the outside? I view it as a mess and something that has really, I think, probably been my prime motivation. Politics wasn't in the cards for me. Like you mentioned, I've been dedicated to public service my entire life. As a young girl doing community service, I served as an AmeriCorps volunteer after college up in Boston. I worked with women and children who had escaped domestic violence, as well as community outreach with kids in inner city Boston. And it's why I went to law school. It's why I became an attorney. And to that end, have spent the majority of my time as a lawyer in public service positions. And really just, I'm fed up with people, our elected officials, putting politics over problem solving. And that's what's driven me to run. I've been an advocate for 20 years, fighting for what's right, case by case. And I've been driven to get off the sidelines and now go fight for our communities at large in the State House and have kind of a bigger, larger impact. I think we need kind of more concerned citizens with different skill sets getting into our elected positions and getting work done for South Carolina.
What work would you, let me ask you, what set skills do you have for this particular House seat?
Well, as I said, I've been an advocate. So, as a litigator, I've been a courtroom attorney, fighting cases. So in terms of, I have the skill set to not just go up to Columbia to vote yes or no on legislation, but to dig in, research, speak with constituents, draft and actually sponsor legislation. I think we don't send someone up there just to vote yes or no. We need really strong leaders that are going to take on the issues and create solutions and run with that with proposed legislation. I've also the vast majority of court cases, litigation resolves in a mediation and resolution. So to that end, for most of my cases, I've contentious legal cases, have spent time mediating, both sides coming to an agreement, and I have that skill set as well. I think that really comes in handy with the legislature when you're working with 2 parties, different viewpoints in terms of having to come to a consensus so we can get laws passed.
Where is the leadership right now in House District 112 in your mind?
I think we don't have action and we don't have advocacy. Again, that's kind of the 2 main reasons I'm running. I think we need someone who will get in there and take the bull by the horns and run with it instead of just voting. I am a conservative, and we need more than someone who's just voting yes or no.
How long have you lived in the district?
We moved here in 2013. My husband served 12 years active duty with the U.S. Army, so we were kind of around the country and chose the low country, Mount Pleasant, to settle when Colin finished up his Army service. So we came in 2013, started in Mount Pleasant, and currently live on Sullivan's Island. We've been there about 3.5 years.
Now, 9 years? Of course. And how long has your, let me ask you this. How did your relationship begin with the constituents of House District 112?
In what way? What do you mean, my relationship?
How did your relationship begin with the constituents?
Well, I am a constituent. I've been a constituent of 112. I'm active in the community, obviously, as an attorney, as well as we have 2 daughters in the local schools. So I've been active in the school systems, throughout the neighborhoods, our friends. I serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals out on Sullivan's Island as well. I'm active in the Diocese of Charleston. So for the Catholic school systems, I 2 years ago started serving on the task force that was put together of how to open up South Carolina Catholic schools. So I served as the only parent designee on that group, and proud of that work that we were able to get those schools open in August of 2020 and the kids safely in school. I also serve on the school advisory council for the diocese, so it's sort of like a school board type for our Catholic education. We're active in our church, do service work, so just, out and about in the community, I think professionally, personally, as well as through community service throughout. We have friends and colleagues throughout all 4 towns that make up 112.
What are the last figures of the population for District 112?
The last figures?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know. You mean like population-wise?
Yeah, what's the population? What is the population for the past 2 years in House District 112?
Oh, gosh, I'd have to look that up. I mean, I know the islands, obviously, Sullivan's Island has a couple thousand, an ILP, and then Awendaw is about 1,600 people. So particularly for the swath of Mount Pleasant that we're in, I'd have to look up what that number is. Now, I do know for each district seat, it's roughly the same population. So for 112, that's why geographically it's so big, because parts of Awendaw and that swath of Mount Pleasant, you just have more growth up that way. So it really geographically is probably the largest area. If you're looking immediately into the Mount Pleasant districts, it makes up the biggest geographic area.
What is the pace of growth in House District 112?
Well, I think you have 4 towns. So you have Awendaw, Isle of Palms, Sullivan's Island, and a vast area of Mount Pleasant. All 4 have very different issues, different levels of growth, infrastructure change, but also they're all very close together. So you have people moving, across lines, going to the beach recreationally. So you have different issues to deal with. So Awendaw is dealing with kind of being on the cusp, I think, of potential growth. There's some discussion in that area on faulty builders building some large neighborhoods. The representative needs to be an active liaison with that, with the state level agencies that are going to, if you have any sort of population infrastructure growth like that, obviously you're involving Department of Transportation, DHEC, you're building on Cape Romaine and the marshes. I believe there's septic tanks that are at use there, DNR. So I see the representative really needs to be that active liaison with the state to help facilitate that process, because we can't stop growth, but we have to do it in a measured, thoughtful manner to maintain, obviously, the quality of life of why everybody's here. Mount Pleasant continues to grow up 17. The islands, of course, have their own issues, being on the beach and dealing with those types of issues, as well as the tourism.
Now, and I'm going to get back to that in just a second, because there's a lot of issues right there.
Mm-hmm.
How did you ensure growth, Jackie, with smart growth for District 112?
Well, like I said, I think absolutely with being an active liaison. So a lot of the growth issues and infrastructure things to vote on in terms of what's going to be implemented is more of a town or even a county level. But our state representative needs to be there to facilitate discussions and talks with these state level agencies that absolutely are going to be involved. And that is one role that I think should be taken very seriously, and that I would take seriously, and that's to help facilitate. I mean, and like I said, with being a litigator, you got to bring people to the table. You got to communicate early and you got to communicate often. And I think that transfers just as well over to our legislature and dealing with your district, that we need someone who's going to help with the communication so everybody can be on the same page, work through. There's going to be disagreements. You can't get away from that. But the more we communicate, the more we have someone there to help facilitate resolutions earlier on. I think then we don't get to the point where there's conflict and we have two sides that are so entrenched and can't move forward. So for the best of everybody and for our state, as well as the local residents, I think our representative really needs to be there helping to facilitate negotiations.
As a candidate right now, what discussions have you actually facilitated in House District 112?
Well, I'm talking with constituents all the time. And even prior to running for office, I was, like I said, heavily involved with not only the Catholic schools opening, but also working with groups like the Moms for Liberty. That's an issue that I I take seriously in terms of educating our kids during the pandemic, absolutely having our kids in school and having the ability to continue with their education. And I think any parent knows that learning this way, like you and I are talking, was terrible. It's not the way that most children can learn. So being active in fighting for our kids early on, since announcing my candidacy, just talking with constituents about issues, attending. I was up in Awendaw during their council meeting, hearing the discussions, what residents are saying about the development that's being proposed. Afterwards, talking with the planning board members, kind of their positions. So just trying to get out there, obviously, and keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on and hear from people.
Now, in those discussions, what are the other conflicts are you hearing from Awendaw, Sullivan's Island, Mount Pleasant, Isle Palms?
Well, I mean, in terms of just, I think this is probably across the board for all South Carolinians, if not all Americans, is inflation right now, and putting money back in the pockets of South Carolinians. I mean, everybody's really being stretched with gas prices, utilities, food, people building. There's lots of growth and building in this district, and kind of the supply chain and the cost of lumber and all that. So everything's just sky high. So everybody, I think, is pretty much watching their dollar at this point, and that's something that what can we do at the state level? I see. Hopefully it's going to pass this week, some of the tax cut package that's up in the legislature right now, in terms of, getting some money back in the pockets of our hardworking citizens.
And I want to talk about that a little bit later, but what has been the most important thing that has changed in House District 112 in the past 4 years?
Well, I mean, growth. I would think anyone would say that, we just continue to grow. Sullivan's is probably one of those where it's not necessarily growing, but changing in terms of some of the older houses being renovated, built upon. So you have that. Everybody's always wanting to come out to the island. So you continue to have a need, the infrastructure to support enjoying our beaches that everybody obviously loves and wants to come to. But then Mount Pleasant, really growth. I think that's balancing growth and infrastructure because of our roadways and the access, and yet we have so many people coming and the neighborhoods being built. And how do we go forward in the future so that obviously people can get around?
Now, what's more important for your district, Jackie? Building new homes and commercial space, or better utilizing, rehabbing, expanding the existing homes?
I would say, I think we're fairly close. I mean, for the majority of the district, let's leave Awendaw out, because there obviously is a lot of land in Awendaw that's not developed. There's still some swaths of that upper 17 area of Mount Pleasant as well. But the other majority of the district in Mount Pleasant, as well as Sullivan's and IOP, I think, it's fairly getting close to being maxed out. So, of course, we have pockets that could be developed, but I think, yes, dealing with what's there now, renovating, moving forward with that, and maybe dealing with some better ways for our infrastructure of moving people in and out. But then you do have, there's still parts of Mount Pleasant that I know are being eyed for development in Awendaw. So that's going to be definitely on the table for those parts of the towns to be looking at in the future. And again, doing it, like take Awendaw, for instance. I think the development being proposed is going to quickly almost double the size of population in Awendaw. So that's something that if you're doubling a population in a short period of time, is your police, your EMS, or is your infrastructure there to support that? So everybody needs to kind of be thinking about those issues and making sure that it's done in a stepwise process that matches being able to support your communities.
Now, is infrastructure there for the folks in Awendaw?
I think currently, what I've heard, it's pretty stretched as is. So that is something, if we're going to be growing the population drastically, then those resources are going to need to be substantially beefed up as well.
Now, since you're a lawyer, I can probably ask you this question. Can you identify any housing trends in the community, such as an increase in absentee landlords, mortgage foreclosures, decreasing home values, and or increasing housing prices?
Well, I think everything's increasing in this district. Across probably the low country. I mean, in terms of prices, I don't see, I think you had asked me initially on the list was about depreciation.
Yes, ma'am. Absentees, landlords, mortgage foreclosures, and decreasing home values, that is.
I'm not aware of those being particular issues currently in the district. If anything, I think we have, really high prices, which maybe is prohibitive to people who want to sell and move and stay in the district. But if anything, the prices have obviously skyrisen over the last 2 years, and I haven't seen that slow down so much yet.
Now, where exactly in your district do you identify and also develop those unique characteristics when it comes to residential, commercial, and mixed use?
Well, I mean, I think they're scattered throughout. I mean, Mount Pleasant has several of those types of areas where you have, living, the community living, condo apartment with, I'm just thinking of like off of Coleman, the Boulevard over by Town Center. They have that. The islands, I think, are unique in and of themselves. It's probably, I'm a proponent of as is. You have your houses. IOP has condos as well, and we have our quaint restaurants and venues and whatnot, which give it its wonderful character. But up Mount Pleasant, I think, those neighborhoods, you have those large communities. Carolina Park is in the district,
right,
which has varying size homes. You have the library up there, that it's the Awendaw High School, a lot that you can get to, access easily, as well as then restaurants that are popping up on 17. So people don't necessarily have to come too far into town. I noticed there's a new home team going in up that way as well. So I think people have access to what, they enjoy in terms of going out and shopping and restaurants and enjoying our community services too.
Now, how would you actually maintain and enhance the existing residential and commercial character of the district and actually provide for compatible, appropriate, and high quality development and redevelopment?
Well, I think, again, like I said, that a lot of those development issues are going to be at your town council decision-making level. But I think keeping that relationship and communication open and ongoing with the state representative is key, in terms of bringing in especially the roadways and access, and looking at population growth and how people access. Because people travel to downtown, going up to, my husband actually has a reverse commute going up towards Somerville, but a lot of people obviously are coming into Mount Pleasant or downtown, and we need to be looking at how people move and rush hour, because that's just getting worse and worse. And I think at the state level, that is clearly where the rep needs to come in to help with those discussions and planning.
Let me jump right into it. What 10-year plan would you submit to the Department of Transportation to correct the backlog of maintenance and actually fix roads in 112?
Well, it's interesting. The 112 district does not have 41 in it, which is part, Highway 41, which I think is key. So I will be honest, I haven't honed in too much on that. And I would and will, because even though it's not in the district, obviously people in the district will be traveling that way. So that needs to be looked into, as well as going into, was it Berkeley County with Clements Ferry? And I think for this side of things, that's where we've got to figure out, how are we going to move people? I grew up in Atlanta, which is massive and huge. And it was even in the 80s when I was a kid, in the 90s, but even now, obviously more so. But as cities grow and your suburbs grow, you've got to figure out how people are going to be moving in and out. So I think those are two of the main thoroughfares around here that need to be looked into, as well as, as Awendaw grows and we just have 17. What can we do about that? Are there ways? You're restricted, obviously, with the water, Francis Marion Forest. So that's going to take some creativity, if not, maybe stop measures at some point of what can really be, what's the capacity of that roadway.
Now, what measures would you currently stop if you could?
Would I currently stop?
Yes, measures for that. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think right now I'm trying to think of what's actually moving forward, because right now, everything I just talked about, there's no hard and fast plan right now for, there's just discussions in terms of what's going to go on with 41 and Clements Ferry, as well as Awendaw. Right. So I think we're actually at a pretty optimal point where, again, I go back to that communication. and just being measured. So this is where you need to bring the experts to the table, the interested parties, to actually be doing thoughtful discussions on roadways and capacity, and bring the players in who know what they're talking about to actually go through it, because rather than putting the horse before the cart. So I think we're actually at a good point where that needs to be a stepwise process, and we can still do that.
Now, what stakeholders would you bring to the table currently?
I definitely would bring, Department of Transportation, because we're talking about roadways. I would bring DHEC, because in terms of the environmental, and DNR, I'm thinking up 17, where we're dealing with the forest and we're dealing with the marshlands. I would bring, obviously, our town council level. We need our city planners. We need experts who do have that background in terms of people moving and car capacity and whatnot, as well as what it's going to do to the environment in terms of parts of these, especially like the Clements Ferry 41, if we're moving into areas that aren't as developed right now too, and taking away those green spaces.
Now, what environmental impacts do you fear might be coming next for your district?
Well, I think that with the land growth, because obviously the more we're going up 17 into Awendaw and developing, we're getting rid of a lot of that natural beauty, and for a lot of people that have settled in that northern Mount Pleasant, Awendaw area, they did so purposefully, liking the quiet, liking the less population. And I don't think that we can put a full stop. I'm not advocating for that, nor do I think that's realistic, but I do, again, caution that it needs to be measured, and there will be a capacity level that it can go to. So I think looking into to how to do that and do it slowly.
I was just thinking about this, Jackie, but let me ask you, what incentives do you want the developers to bring into House District 112?
I think with anything, if you're bringing in developments, I mean, that's an opportunity for jobs for people that, maybe in terms of that construction work. I think, we have a lot of folks around here looking for jobs, and that would be something that could come up. Putting investment into our education. I mean, we all have a vested interest in educating our youth, because they're our future that's going to support our economy, our jobs, continuing quality of life. So I think coming in with that and supporting different community issues. I think, we turn to our government a lot to say we need a solution for this, help our community. And I think our builders, our corporations that are in a city, in a town, in a community, they have the means as well to give back to the community, to help with after school programs, to help with different maybe social issues. But I think we all have a role in making our communities better, and our corporations do as well, because they have the means to do that. And the better and stronger the community is, the more support their business will get as well.
Now, how should Charleston County create a dedicated funding stream for attainable housing development through zoning and other planning tools?
Attainable housing? So
yes, ma'am.
What do you mean by attainable?
Yes, ma'am. Some people call it attainable. Some people call it affordable. Some people call it, workforce. What do you call it?
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were asking about. So, in terms of affordable housing, the one issue with affordable housing that my concern is that it oftentimes ends up subsidizing these bigger builders, so that they end up not putting in the taxes to our town, to our communities, by kind of an offset of bringing in the housing. And I would like to see more that there's housing that's appropriately priced for our working people to be able to live here and work, and obviously do that. So I don't know, it's not an easy solution, but I think, again, that's one that we need to do a deep dive into and make sure that we're not, too much support of corporations, that we're losing sight of what our real goal is here.
What is the current tax base in House District 112?
I need to look that up. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Going back to, obviously, what I just mentioned, the housing situation, what is it? Is it really affordable housing, or attainable housing, or is it workforce housing?
For District 112?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have knowledge that there is an issue in terms, I mean, people are moving into 112 all the time. I mean, if anything, there's not a lot of inventory. And we have, housing that ranges from rental units, apartments, to townhomes, condos, to obviously large multi-million dollar homes. So that, I don't see that as being one of the pressing issues specifically for 112 right now, in terms of that I have heard that there's people that want to live right here right now that don't. Now, I know one thing that I want to look into more is in terms of our law enforcement, our firefighters, teachers, what specifically are they, I'd like to hear from them. Are they finding that with their salaries, they are able to find housing that fits their budget in 112? But I need to find that out.
Okay. How should future increases to maximize residential densities be conditional within the zoning code so that a certain percentage of new units will be reserved for affordable housing in your district?
I don't have a ready answer for that. I think that's something that, I would need to talk with our specifically, I'm thinking Mount Pleasant for that issue, not necessarily the other three, but with town council and what do they currently do versus what could we do? Because, I mean, just as someone, even as a resident living in this area, I mean, we have a new apartment complex going up that I can see out my window, as well as I know we have existing, and like I said, there's it's a variable in terms of the type of residential options we have. So I think that's something that, as a representative, we'd want to work with Mount Pleasant Town Council to see what from the state level, what help they would need on that.
Now, how many homes in your district have been built at a fairly consistent rate?
Oh, how many homes?
Yes, ma'am.
In what time frame? I mean, I don't have a number I just know that I've been here for 9 years and have seen the growth myself. So it's certainly been steady, especially up 17. I mean, you can see that, you've seen the growth of Park West into Carolina Park and Darrell Creek and Tupelo Bay, which Tupelo Bay I think came about the time when I came here. So it's, I mean, that whole corridor has grown in the time that I've been a resident.
Now, what is the median home price for an average home in your district?
Well, that's going to, I mean, again, you have the 4 towns, so it's going to be different on each of the towns. So I don't know exactly the median price range. I'd have to look that up. But I mean, Mount Pleasant and the Islands is certainly probably one of the highest, I would guess, in the state in terms of home pricing.
Well, let me ask you this, Jackie. What is the household type in District 112?
We have, there are a lot of families, a lot of younger families with younger children up to high school. We also are getting retirees. I think up in, some of the homes up Mount Pleasant, you have older couples that have retired to this area. The Islands, you have a mix as well. And then, of course, I think Isle of Palms, you maybe even have some residents that come for the winter, leave for the summer, and you have the rental properties out on IOP that happen. But I mean, the vast majority, I think you're looking at families and retired folks.
Now, what current private partnerships would you be in favor for as far as expanding infrastructure in your district?
Well, like I kind of touched upon briefly, I think tapping into our companies, corporations that set up shop here in Mount Pleasant, just having, turning around and investing in the community. And that's one of the things when I mentioned that I did AmeriCorps back, that was in 1998. But one of the tenet of that was you had a team of basically young adults, 18 to 22-year-olds or 23, and you were sponsored by a corporation that was giving back as well. And you were going into the community with that organization specifically, was helping a lot with kids. So whether it was after school, community centers, parks, tutoring, as well as, like I said, I was on specifically the domestic violence team. But I think, even in our community here, all of that adds, the more investment we have in our communities just makes our where we live safer and stronger, and that we're all stakeholders in what goes on. So I would like to see more investment from our corporations that come here. Even if, getting small businesses to be involved, it just brings us all together as well. And I think then businesses get the they have people that come to their businesses to shop or support them, as well as then they are giving back to the community. So I would hope to help with that networking and building those relationships.
Now, how many infrastructure projects are in the works in your district?
I don't have a number on the infrastructure things. Projects. I wouldn't be able to answer that, but just knowing, what in terms of development, in terms of neighborhoods, we have, so I know Mount Pleasant has a couple of areas where the zoning is up in the air of whether it can be a hotel or be a restaurant. Those are the issues I think that the district is mostly dealing with in terms of its residential growth, and then maybe, some pockets of commercial.
Now, how much tax revenue has the state lost over the past 2 years?
Oh, I don't have the answer to that, Quintin. I'm sorry. I don't know.
No worries. Let me go back to those businesses. What business relationship have you formed with those small businesses on the Isle of Palms and say right there on Jasper and on the Sullivan's Island?
I think being, a participant through BZA, I'm friends with some of the restaurant owners and managers out here, as well as, some friends on the Chamber of Commerce in Mount Pleasant, making those relationships. So, and then, honestly, it's all about networking and getting out there and working with different community sectors. One of the kind of projects, my husband's now he's, after being in the Army, he's a private practice physician, and he's a business owner in his medical practice. So we know a lot of those practices in this district as well. And I think, I had mentioned about the corporations, manufacturers, small businesses having investment, but I think our professionals can likewise invest in the communities as well, whether they be doctors and lawyers, accountants, and bringing everybody to the table.
And unfortunately, Zoom is telling me I'm running out of time. But let me ask you this. What is the state's current operating budget?
The state's current operating budget, I don't have that number in front of me. I know we obviously every year balance the budget, so I'd have to look that up for you. But glad to answer anything if you're wondering about specifics of my thoughts on money, where it's going.
Now, let me ask you this, Jackie. What port projects in House District 112 would you eliminate if you were elected?
Pork projects?
Yes, ma'am.
I can't think of any specific pork projects for 112. I would, overall, I think number one, hands down, is we need to be looking at how we're spending money in educating our children. Before COVID, we spent $10 billion, and our outcomes for our children we're not getting our money's worth. We're letting our kids down. 50% of Charleston County third graders read below grade level. Up to 60% of eighth graders are not proficient in math. And all that money, it's very top heavy in terms of the bureaucracy and the administration, leaving our kids in the classrooms and our teachers without that support. So that is something where I think we have major work, major reformation to do in terms of our education system, and a place we all have, as I said, a vested interest in making sure our kids are being educated because they're the future of our state.
Now, what is the current retention rate for teachers in House District 112?
I don't know the specific percentage. I feel bad you keep asking me questions on these specific stats that I'm not familiar with, but I think it's fairly high in 112. But again, across the board, our teachers are stretched thin in terms of the requirements that they have to adhere to, the resources that they get, and of course the salaries that they're paid. So we do need to do more and better to support our teachers.
Now, should the teacher pay increase, Jackie, be an average of 5% over the next 2 years?
That's a good question. I'd have to see how that works out. I haven't seen the specific 5% stat, so I would need to see how that spells out, what that means number-wise. But I would definitely be interested in looking into that.
Now, should the state fund individualized professional growth for teachers?
Should the state fund,
individualized professional growth for teachers.
what do you mean by individualized? I'm just not following the question.
Oh, no worry, I'll just go into the next one.
Okay.
Smaller classes would obviously raise student achievement by what percentage?
Oh gosh, I mean, I have no idea what the percentage would be. I mean, I think anyone who has children and sees their kids learn, smaller is better, but I don't know what the specific statistic would be.
And let me quickly go over to obviously the big issues on the island right now. How would you work with the South Carolina Department of Transportation to ensure that all residents of South Carolina, not just island residents, have the same rights and privileges of parking along state-owned right-of-ways in most of the beach communities?
Right, and that's obviously is a very hot issue, I think, from the last 2 years. And I mean, the current law is that Department of Transportation does have to approve any changes in parking, and there has to be free aspects of the, or access to free parking as well. You know, I think as the representative, the number one job responsibility is, again, facilitating the discussions between the state, DOT, and whether it be Isle of Palms or Sullivan's or Mount Pleasant, what have you. But your job is to facilitate bringing people to the table and negotiating. It is not to create more conflict. It is not to drive a wedge between the two, because we can see what happens when that is done. More conflict means your interested parties are not talking, and then everybody suffers. Your island residents suffer, your communities that obviously and deserve to come enjoy the beaches suffer. So one of the things that that I would take seriously is being a facilitator of talks, of negotiations, so that we can come to a resolution that everybody can be happy with, rather than driving a wedge further between the two and creating more conflict.
Now, what House bill, Jackie, would be ideal to ensure that excessive fines are not levied for minor parking infractions on public roadways?
Yeah, I know that is an issue. So I think especially given that the island's parking fees are much higher than, for instance, a parking ticket in downtown Charleston. So I think, you know, one of the first levels that could be done, even kind of as a sidebar, would be talking with, because those towns could pass, they're the ones that are controlling those fees. So again, communicating early. So have some discussions, see if the town would be amicable to restructuring their fee schedule before we have to take this to, you know, almost like Big Brother up in the State House passing a law. That would be my first step, would be talking with the local town councils about those issues before coming in, you know, with a hammer. But if need be, that's what the State House is for.
And how would you actually support action to ensure that safe bicycle lanes are established on the roadways that lead to beaches, including the Isle of Palms connector? Right,
and I mean, and currently there's the 2 lanes for the bicycles on IOP, and I know that, you know, there's some back and forth and disagreement with taking away kind of a safety 3rd lane, and discussions that I think we need a bike lane, just the same as Sullivan's Island Bridge. We have the one side bike lane. So that, again, let's communicate. Let's bring everybody to the table. Let's bring DOT. Let's bring IOP, Town Council, and Mayor representative there to help facilitate. And let's talk it out and not have one side act without the other having any sort of input, so that everybody can walk away at the end of the day knowing they said their piece, we were all listened to, and we came up with a solution collectively.